baby. Don't you want me? Oh, don't you want me, baby? Don't you want me? Oh, do 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 do. Boo doo 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 doo. Doo diddle diddle doo. Fucking Twitch taking forever. Yeah, just update it all. All of them. All of them. All the time. I don't know what's going on with the restream. I do not know with this thing. I never do. Alright. Oh, this is a problem with actually writing something. You actually have to have it in front of you. Cut my balls into pieces. This is my last resort. Castration, no breeding. Don't give a fuck if you cut my balls merely. Alright, I'm Dan Cohen. This is Sons of Tree Air. Tree Air After Hour content. This is outside our normal business hours. Yeah, alright. No, Tree's just doing what he's supposed to do. Good. That's how you stop doing shit. You gotta do shit in the evening. Alright, so as promised, let's go ahead and talk critical race theory, which is big in the news right now. It's really, really big. Conservatives are taking it to court. By the way, I'm Dan Cohen. The plugs are in the link and the tweet if anybody's bothering to watch this live. Um, Whatever, can't focus on that. So, what you are seeing a lot of is shit in the news about critical race theory. And I gotta tell you, it's being discussed among some pretty big brain people like Ben Shapiro and the Nightly News and random people off the street who heard it on Fox News and on CNN. And I'd like to just point out some of the headlines we're getting because of this elusive, all powerful social theory. Fox Business, Raytheon's critical race theory program calls on white employees to acknowledge privilege. A report. Good. That's always good. How and why Loudoun County became the face of the nation's culture wars. The wealthy county outside D.C. is exploding with controversy over critical race theory and transgender rights. The Washington Post. That's a very liberal county. That doesn't surprise me at all. USA Today, here's a great one. What I discovered about critical race theory in public schools and why it shouldn't be taught. Let's just go ahead and peruse that real quick to get a. Oh, that's for only for subscribers, so nope. New York Post. Decolonize your bookshelf. Leaked documents show defense contractor Raytheon uses critical race theory. Honestly, that's enough of a condemnation in and of itself, right? Which is fascinating. The conservatives hate it because that's kind of their bag. Oh, it's a defense contractor. I had better do what they want. The fact that they're not teaching critical of other races theory, instead critical race theory, makes me feel bad. So, that is already a pretty convincing opener as to why we should talk about it and why we should be left critical of critical race theory. So, the right critique is essentially you're trying to make white people feel bad about being white, and the formation of critical race theory, I'm going to break it down, is essentially a narrative under liberalism. As we can see, it's a very popular narrative right now, right? And that's actually kind of a bad sign because normally academic theories aren't in our newspapers and on CNN and so on. That's where the hegemon that is capitalism goes to avoid you thinking about these kind of things. So the fact that it's in the news is a bit suspicious. Right? I'm just going to be real. So this is the result of the 1619 project. I was first informed about this via the This Is Revolution podcast from Jason Miles and Pascal Robert discussing it. So some of the facts I have, I will try to cite my source on that. But the 1619 project details extensively the story of slavery in the North America, specifically the United States of America. Okay. In and of itself, that doesn't sound like too much of a bad thing. But the critique that Mr. Robert and Mr. Miles have presented is compelling enough that we should be suspicious of it. Essentially, it focuses extensively and creates exclusivity about the slave narrative in what we call the United States of America, which is a tad bit problematic because that is objectively, there's no denying this, unless you're a piece of shit, right? And you're just just deny bad things for other people who aren't pale. Um, it's horrific. It robs people of their labor. It gets people raped and murdered. Slavers are a problem we still deal with today. We haven't actually eliminated the totality of slavery. We've just eliminated chattel slavery, breeding people as slaves, capturing fresh slaves, etc. For the purpose of breeding them and institutionalizing a massive slave project that is socially acknowledged as an economic power. Now we quietly capture people and put them in prisons and put them to work for $1 an hour or less. So we launder our slavery, or we offload our slavery into other places where we can employ small children. Okay, but this is the paradox of the problem. As Pascal Robert points out, this only accounts for 4% of all the slave trade that went on during that era. So just 4% of that activity. Okay, so 96% of it is not unique to North America. So we already have to kind of pump the brakes, because to center the narrative of just 4%, to center the narrative of less than 10% of the population might be appropriate in certain circumstances if you're teaching specifically about the American slave experience as part of the global slave trade, right? If you did a unit on that and you were teaching about slavery, that would be entirely appropriate. That was certainly part of it. Again, 4%. It happened. It's real. That's something to discuss. It has ramifications that we're still dealing with today. Right? We still deal with slavery today, as I pointed out earlier, through the prison system. So these are real things. But to make America in the narrative, the United States of America, to make it an exceptional problem should set off warning bells inside your head, right? Now, we're still talking about the 1619 project. We're going to get the bread and butter of it, but we need to know the underpinning. Where's the data coming from to create this theory, right? What is going on? So, with the data of the 1619 project, we create a narrative of American exceptionalism, but in the negative. So now, instead of being exceptionally good, as the conservatives like to paint the country, the nation state, it's now exceptionally bad. We are uniquely and out of the entire globe, out of the entire span of history, we are uniquely evil. That should set off some warning signs. It becomes quite easy to think about a number of atrocities throughout history that humans have committed on other humans, where America may not even have been an idea of a project yet. This is, pre the formation of the notions that there could be this colonial project. So that's kind of troubling. Again, if you're only looking at the concurrent time frame, 4%. So to paint America as a uniquely evil actor in this is ahistorical. That's another big warning sign. Liberals love ahistorical narratives. Conservatives love ahistorical narratives. Liberalism, the ideology of which those are the two wings, when you see those memes about the two wings of capitalism, you're talking about liberalism as a political project. Liberalism loves to be ahistorical. It's my favorite noise tonight, by the way. And one of my favorite words, ahistorical. So, fun. Um, we need to then consider that we have been presented with an ahistorical narrative. I'm going to repeat it, an ahistorical narrative. I love that word, about slavery. And again, it paints a picture of American exceptionalism in the negative. That's something we should also be worrisome over. Because even though it is in the negative, the critical part is exceptionalism. We in America love to think that we're on this magic fucking island with no neighbors, when in fact we have one to the north, one to the south, and a whole bunch of people down the block in the form of island nations. And our imperial territory extends into the Pacific Ocean and into the Atlantic Ocean. Not to mention all the military bases, which are technically American soil, meaning we have intruded upon other people's neighborhoods. We go to your house and take a piss on the lawn and say it's ours. We do the imperialism too, but I say too because we weren't always the biggest one. Prior to that, there was England, who was a participant in the slave trade, one of the critical motivators, frankly. The origin island of liberal democratic capitalism, where we learned it all from. So there's nothing exceptional about it. Having decided to continue it to this modern era isn't even really that outstanding, exceptional. We have plenty of prisons all across the world where people are still forced to work. So even in that regard, it is an American problem, but it is also a problem for other nations that they are responsible for solving. It's not our responsibility to solve those. It is our responsibility to work in solidarity to give them the power to solve those. And likewise, they have a responsibility to act in solidarity with us to solve them. There, I said it. We need an international. Moving on. Liberalism loves to be ahistorical in the sense that liberalism wants to cut off history as everything before liberal democratic capitalism. And liberalism loves the narrative of American exceptionalism, even if it's in a negative. Okay? So we are exceptionally racist by their standards, which on any specific issue may or may not actually be true. Again, 4% of the slave trade, 96% of it was conducted everywhere else. We contributed, certainly, and we have to own that, but we are not exceptionally evil, and we are certainly not unique in that particular evil. So that's something to get out of your head right now. This is a global problem. Now that exceptionalism and that exceptionalist thinking is a type of racism in and of itself. It favors the narratives of American citizens who are born of that legacy of capture or slave breeding while ignoring others. Okay? This is a market negotiation on the idea of racial justice. And market negotiations are things liberalism loves. So that is also to be very, very suspect. So this is the background data. Okay? This is what is used then to create what the liberals call critical race theory, which is ostensibly supposed to be an offset of the Marxist tradition of critical theory. And you can do critical theory for pretty much anything as long as it is within the confines of a super system and has everything from individual monadic actors, like in ourselves, up through the super system that is created from the massive decision making from all those individual monads. So in and of itself, critical race theory isn't really all that shocking. That underlying premise of taking critical theory and applying it to race really is not anything to write home about in and of itself. The breakdown mechanism appears to be in line with Derrida in a postmodernist manner, the deconstruction, which is what I am in fact engaging in now as well. We are trying to look at the underlying premises that create the theory, and we're going to tear them apart one by one. So deconstruction is a very powerful and useful technique. We shouldn't shy away from using deconstruction, Perhaps some of the other parts of postmodernism, I would, argue tit for tat, are really, really devastating, but deconstruction in and of itself allows us to get at the truth. There's the stated objective, right? There's the stated goal of the thing, in this case, critical race theory, which is to weed out racism in our institutions. That's a fine premise, but we're going to explore if that's what liberalism is actually doing with this particular tool. Okay? And again, deconstruction is good because we take that initial premise, we take the background facts, and we're going to take through their narrative and work through what they're doing, how they present their narrative, how they apply their theory, etc. And again, I cannot stress it enough. The breaking down an analysis of super systems for what phenomena are going on within them is 100% in the realm of Marxism. It's 100% in the realm of sociology, hell, even psychology to some degree, science, etc. This is a normal thing. We should be doing this. That part, not really egregious or offensive. But as I always say, we should be suspicious of any narrative under liberalism, especially one that's getting so much attention, that's taking up so much of our fucking news time, and is beloved as a talking point between both sides of the liberal culture war. That's a really big warning sign for me. That we ought to be breaking this down further and what is actually going on. So, Jason Miles promised to be talking about this later. He uses a really good analogy of a shopkeeper. I'm going to break that down here. The thought experiment is this. You're running a shop. For the sake of argument, it's a bookshop, right? You're selling books. And at the exact same time, within your field of vision, walks in a black customer and a white customer together. Now, go get it. I'm in the middle of a live stream, honey. You're supposed to be in bed. You're kind of breaking the rules right now. It's 10:30, sweetie. You need to go to bed. You're just prancing. Kids, gotta love them. Anywho, so the shopkeeper, that's you, see, as you look at the door, when you hear the little bell ring, you look at the door, black customer, white customer, they walk in at the exact same time. So the question to be posed is, which one of them do you call out to first? Who do you pay attention to first? Right? The black customer or the white customer? Here's the problem. If you pick the black customer first, the old idea, and this is all again Jason Miles' work, is that black people need to be stewarded within your store because the likelihood of theft has gone up because there's a black person in your store. Hence, racism. Bam. Done. Right there. You're racist. Right? But if you pay attention to the white customer first, that's because white people get privileged treatment. Bam. Racist. We're done. That's it. So in that binary, you now have to weigh utilitarian principles, right? Which one makes you look less racist? That's what you're playing the game of now. It's utilitarian risk assessment. I want to take a quick aside here, right? This is really no different than the trolley problem. Here's the idea of the trolley problem. The trolley's out of control. You're at the switch to switch the tracks. You're right at the track where the tracks can switch. On one side, there's a person. On the other side, there's a person. Do you flip the switch or not? Who do you kill? Right? Who do you kill? Utilitarian thinking. Who do you kill? And there's a legitimate problem there. Utilitarianism really isn't the thing you should be applying in this situation. It's inappropriate. Logically, if you can see this trolley, if we take the trolley problem for a moment, if you can see the trolley coming down the tracks and it hasn't arrived yet, there's two people on the tracks, the reason would stand that you should try to get both of them off the tracks. You should make the attempt. And then if only one of them leaves, divert the track to where it's left. Problem solved. Two people alive. The utilitarian principle is upheld completely. But that's not the option. The option is the binary. It's A-B thinking. Yes, no, left, right, up, down, Coke or Pepsi. It is the logic of consumerism. You are at a choice, and that you have to make an immediate choice within the information you have. There's no time to weigh it. You have to make that choice right the hell now. or the situation will be unaltered, the system will engage as it's going to, somebody's going to die. Okay? So, again, problems with that thinking are one, it's best applied. Utilitarian thinking is best applied when you're looking for something fun to do or what you'd like to eat. It is the logic of consumerism and consumption. Number two, it will function just fine in an emergency like that. If you really can't, if you really cannot, in a time of crisis, weigh the best possible decision, because the crisis is that immediate and in your face. And I'm talking the gunman's there now, you can push one person out of the way kind of thing. Or like the trolley, it's that close, you have seconds to flip that switch. Utilitarian thinking is absolutely fine. But it really doesn't work beyond those two things, because here, if we go back to the shopkeeper thought experiment for a moment, there's an obvious solution, isn't there? If you really think about it. You can say, hey, if either of you need anything, you let me know. Or don't do anything. They can just come in and look around at your fucking books, can't they? They're adults. Either of those decisions is fine. If you want to be helpful, go ahead and call out to them both. Hello? If you need any help, I'm here. Let me know. I'll help you out. Problem solved. You give them agency. Or let them have their damn agency. And I'm not actually going to weight one of those over the other. It depends on your personality, introvert or extrovert type thing. You don't actually have to pick one or the other. You don't have to pay special attention to anybody. Furthermore, the act of calling out to each individually in whatever order doesn't actually evidence any racism. You call it to the black person first in that scenario. You're acknowledging them. You ask them if they need help. They'll tell you yes or no. You either help them or you don't need to help them. You do the same thing for the other person, the white person. Or vice versa, the white and the black. It doesn't actually matter that much. This is a really immature binary. But if we apply the critical race theory as is pretty strictly, because it happens within this framework of existing structural racism, all actions within that framework are racist. And that leads to another problem. This is reification in practice. And I've rallied against reification and trying to break through reification whenever possible. Because the presumption that every individual action is an act of subjective or objective racism just because it takes place within an overarching framework that everybody, including the victim of racism, i.e. systemic racism, occurs within, is logically fallacious. Because, number one, I'm going to be a little dark right here, you can actually pick and choose who you're racist to. That's kind of the soup du jour of this utilitarian farce. You can just pick who you want to be racist to. You don't have to apply your racism unilaterally. So any kind of systemic racism derived from that is kind of facetious at best. You can actually favor that, right? And you can say, well, that's evidence of racism because you're favoring these races. Fair enough, but you're not going to do anything negatively racist to them. Most people will just let that pass by. People like nepotism, to be very frank. Even people who say they don't, they love it when it happens to them. So you wouldn't really notice that it's racist, not unless you have some point of comparison. If the interaction is with a race that you're not racist against, nobody's going to fucking know. So the overall system of racism isn't actively upheld in that kind of scenario because there's no way to apply it to the system or think about it in the system. Number two, you can just not be fucking racist. That's an option. That's always been an option. That's literally the premise to anti-racism. You can just actively or passively not be a fucking racist. Which throws a really big bone in it. Sure, the system that you take place in then, everything you do from wiping your ass to eating a sandwich takes place within a racist system, but your interactions with other races don't actually have to be racist. I mean, you have agency in this situation. It is not racist prima facie simply because you exist and they exist. It is not a passive thing. Attitudes, opinions, etc. All of those things are active decisions you make with your brain. You are not a mindless fucking robot acting within this system, upholding it, right? That's a very liberal idea, that the system is very, very active. That the system is not a sum total of active decisions that take on the nature of a passive machinery, but that the system is active and the individual moving parts all operate within the dance of the system, like gears in a machine. If you will, to follow that analogy out a little more clearly, if you apply the liberal notion of how a super system works, the overarching car moves every individual piece within the car to how the car needs to move. If you view it like a Marxist, the act of starting the ignition creates a set of conditions that allow the next thing to happen, and the next thing to happen, the next thing to happen, and then the car moves. Micro decisions work together to build the system. So if 10 people in town individually interact with each other, and they all talk about an 11th person, and they all come to the conclusion after discussing it with each other, they want to drive that person out of town, and then they take the action to drive them out of town. That is how decisions are made into a system. You now have a society engaging in a systemic act of bigotry. Okay? The decision to throw the person out did not motivate everybody else to then do the things, like have the discussions to throw them out. The cart did not precede the horse. The horse pulled the cart. Action, reaction. You are an active participant in your own existence. Critical race theory says you are an inactive participant. Okay? So we have a problem there as well. It is actually removing human agency from the equation. It is dehumanizing. And if you're a critic of capitalism, that should come of little to no surprise that this thing everybody's obsessed with dehumanizes every single participant in society simultaneously. Literally the fucking playbook. Okay? All right, go to the next part here. I apologize. I write these things down and then I fucking go off script because then I think it's something else. Yeah, we covered that. We covered that. Oh, that's actually, I forgot this point, but this is important. Another thing critical race theory forgets is spontaneous racism, i.e., um, it just came flying out of your mouth because you were thinking it and it came flying out. If you had held it back, nobody ever known better. It ignores accidental racism, something you think isn't racist that you do turns out it is racist and you can't walk it back. Or unintentional racism, where you did something that you earnestly thought was good, other people view it as bad. Slightly different than accidental racism. That's more along the lines of like, I thought of a dirty word or something like that, like a slur, and it came flying out of my mouth. Unintentional is an action. So there's the mental thought and the action. I know they're close, right? So that's also important. You can't explain any of those things without just saying, well, systemic racism. There we go. It doesn't actually take into account anything. It leaves no nuance. It's a binary is, isn't. It is essentialist in its very nature. Essentialism is dangerous. Okay? Two ways to frame essentialism are either generalizations, which may or may not be true, and stereotypes, which also may or may not be true, but stereotypes has a pejorative connotation, right? That's Finkelstein. Well, that holds up. But the problem is with essentialism, you are making that and applying it rigidly to every participant. So the model I liken it to is that under critical race theory, we are just all walking racism ticking time bombs waiting to go off. Nobody knows what the primer is. Nobody knows what the timer counts at, but it's bound to happen because we're all systemically racist. We're just waiting for it to fucking happen. Each and every individual. Okay? The system is built up of racist little gears, so the system can't do anything but racism, which is a set of decisions, as I've said, made by the participants within the machine to continue to allow the machine to be racist. Okay. Yeah, we covered the mutual push-pull. Good. Gonna double check this real quick. Nobody's live. That's good. Actually, is good here. I don't want to get too distracted. So, with critical race theory, then, what we have is first and foremost a reified polemic, a lightning rod to anchor the culture wars. And it allows both sides to set up their terms for good and bad. The morally just, the morally unjust. Good, bad, right, wrong, etc. It is a culture war polemic, first and foremost. It is not actually critical of race in a way that a leftist would be, even though it shares some superficial characteristics and the really hard to reach premise that the American system of government is racist and American society is racist. That was a real hard reach, guys. Glad you get paid more than I do for that kind of work. I know a lot of people who could reach that conclusion and deserve that money. If that's all you can come up with making that money, perhaps you don't deserve that job. However, this then tells you what the actual purpose is, right? And again, it's that moral binary. It has a secondary purpose. Wealthy liberals. Okay. Remember I talked about a little bit ago that there is a notion of American exceptionalism that is a positive, as asserted by conservatives. There's a negative asserted by liberals. So the agreement point is America is exceptional. But America, as a unified society, really only exists for the ruling class. Most of us are disjointed, anarchists by force, not by desire. We like our communities. We love them, folks. We like talking to other people. We really do. That's why we're on Hell's Site. That's why I'm doing this now. So maybe some other person will hear this. So the conservative formation of whiteness at the top is very easy. You all know it. You all say it every day. It is white supremacy. What is the negative form of that still allows you to justify why whites are on top? It is white guilt. And I've talked about this previously as well, but I'll rehash it here. There's two emotions you can feel when you've done something bad. Okay? When you know what you did was morally bad. You can feel guilt or remorse. Guilt is what you feel when you decide to make the active choice to continue the conditions that make you feel guilty. You justify it through that guilt. It is a perfect feedback loop. I take action A, I feel guilty. Since I feel guilty, I know it was wrong. So it's okay, I'm enlightened. I can continue doing action A as long as I can keep having the guilt. The guilt does not act to deter you from the act. The guilt is there to justify the continued action. In this case, what the conservatives would call, or probably not, but we would peg them as having done, white supremacy. Right? The most honest conservatives are actually the Nazis here. They just talk about white supremacy openly. They give up the ghost. Thanks guys. Thanks for helping out on this one. The only useful thing you did was name the thing for us. The supremacy of whites. So white guilt allows you to not feel so bad that what you do harms people. Right? So critical race theory, from a liberal perspective, allows you to continue feeling bad about being white, which really isn't feeling bad about being white, because you're not going to give up anything. You're not going to do anything about it. You're just going to feel guilty because you know you're doing something bad. And through that, you get to feel good because you know it's bad. The unenlightened savages on the conservative side, the dishonest ones, aren't admitting it. So you're better than them. That allows you to justify all that shit, all that stolen fucking surplus value. Remorse is when you feel guilt because you took action A, right? So you took action A, now you feel guilty about it. Then you contemplate what you did. Why was it bad? And then you take steps to avoid doing it again. That's harder to do. That's self-criticism. That would mean if you feel really, really bad about the fact that you steal from your minority and female workers at your burger shop, maybe you go give them a pay raise. Maybe you give them the weekends off that they want. Maybe you give them the days off that they need. Maybe when they're sick, you don't rack up their absentee days and fire them for it. Maybe if they need a pay advancement, you just give them a bonus and write it off. Maybe you do something to improve their material conditions because what they're doing improves yours. Maybe you feel bad about it and you want to do something to make it a little less painful. And you consider the fact, you contemplate the fact that while that doesn't exactly solve the problem, you have alleviated the worst parts of it. There's your reform. That's voluntarily engaged in. You notice they don't do that shit. They don't do that because they want to continue to steal that surplus value. They want to go farther and farther with it. Remorse, white remorse, would be a far more ideal emotion because that tells you something bad has happened. Now, I'm going to be a little bit brutal here and argue for the purposes of everything that happened before your lifetime, you're really not responsible for it. You can't feel guilt or remorse. You have to take those facts in and contemplate them as they are. And then you have to contemplate the system as it is. And the point at which guilt can enter in then is when you think about how you're either A, not doing shit about it, or B, when you know you've actively added to it. That's how you can experience remorse or guilt. And they're not exactly, let me put it to you this way. Guilt is something that can engender fame very quickly. You have a lot of liberal politicians who operate on that premise of white guilt, and then they go on to continue sucking up money and fame. Remorse means maybe you don't suck up all that fame. Maybe you don't just whore yourself out on white guilt apologia. Maybe you take little steps to be more helpful. Maybe you start by not being such a fucking dick all the time. That's not something that's going to win you awards. That's just you morally validating yourself because you know you did something wrong and you know you need to correct it somehow. Liberalism doesn't like that option. Liberalism loves the shame that is added to guilt because if they know you're guilty, if they know you're guilty, you can perform that guilt. You can monetize that guilt. You can continue to acquire power with that guilt. It is the opposite, the negative formation. I don't want to say opposite. Opposite's incorrect because, again, the opposite is remorse. The opposite of white guilt is remorse, and the opposite of white supremacy is egalitarianism. You know, the original pitch of capitalism. Contradictions abound. So that's what you're honestly dealing with. Now, a left version of that is something along these lines. Okay, I was born in shithole country X, America, Canada, the UK, Germany, whatever. Doesn't really matter. They all have blood on their hands for this purpose, so it really doesn't matter. They're all shitholes that do this awful stuff. I was born into those conditions. I've learned about that history, and I have contemplated why those actions were wrong. Then I look at the system as it is and compare it to that history, and can identify what is right and what is wrong. I then act on that moral analysis with that new data. I act now. That is not about performing your guilt or performing your allegiance to a minority. What was that sick shit they were doing at the BLM rallies? White people getting down and licking boots or some bullshit washing feet like they're fucking Jesus Christ, spare me. God. You can participate in that act of redistribution. And here's the beauty of redistribution. Let's say you're a white at the bottom of that chain, and you decide to act in solidarity. That's what I'm describing. You decide to act in solidarity with other people who are eating shit. Suddenly, when the system is overthrown, that redistribution comes to everybody. So you actually do gain by making sure your brothers and sisters are better off. You gain too. You're not left out in the cold thanks to solidarity. Now you can say, well, wait a minute. That means if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna do redistribution, that is a zero-sum game. Yeah, there are gonna be losers, but you're not gonna be on the losing team if you win. It's kind of how it works. You can ensure that you get your slice too, and they get their slice. That is solidarity, and that's fine. That's a fine way to think about it. If we act together, we're both going to gain. The appeal to white supremacy is based on race. You're going to gain a little if you support this. You're going to risk a lot. I'm going to risk very little, and I'm going to gain a lot, but they'll gain nothing, and they're going to risk everything. That's the victory of an idiot. And this is just a quick aside. I love how the people who love capitalism the most can't do the fucking math. I'm not even good at math. But if you're standing to gain 1 while somebody else gains 10 and you take 9 points of risk versus teaming up with other people and take 5 points of risk and stand to gain 5 points, where somebody else is going to lose 10 and gain nothing, duh. I'm sorry, duh. That's dumb. All right? That's why we need to use those words, which I've also posted about. That is dumb. That means you're bad at math. That's what capitalism banks on, is you being dumber than the person manipulating you to do dumb, risky shit. Right? That's the game. That's the whole game to it. Because they need to steal from you. And an awful lot of people let them. Stop being stupid. Stop getting grifted on. They don't love you. They love your labor. Live for your damn self and live for your others. Your peers. Stop living for people who don't care if you get ground up literally in machinery or fall off the ledge. Fall over the railing at a steel mill. That's my Pennsylvania accent coming out. A steel mill. Steel mill. I can't say it right. Pennsylvania accent. A steel mill. You fall over the railing, your ass lands in molten steel, and you're in the next batch. They don't give a shit. They don't care. Now, they may put up a sign that says now hiring. They may let you take a few minutes to mourn your dead fellow steel worker, but there ain't nothing they're going to do about it. They ain't going to increase the size of the damn railing. Shit, they bought off OSHA. Why would they? Pfft, idiot. Be more careful. It's a terrible system the way we have it now. And you, the collective you, love to keep running that bad math like it's going to work out for you. That was a little more shameful than I wanted to be. But there is honestly a way to analyze that. You can look at the problems in the system, and you can aim to do better than them. That's it. That's all it takes. It's not flashy. It's not even really that fun. It's worth it, I would argue, because you'll all be doing better off. It's not really hard to be critical of these super systems. If you want to go through and pick out each individual way, sure, that takes a little more work. But if you want an overarching left theory to start with, I submit to you a new left critical race theory. You start with the idea of analyzing the history. You start with the idea of analyzing the current conditions, and you take action contrary to those so that there can be justice done. Real fucking simple. And with that, I said this was going to be a shorter one. It is clocking in at 43 to 45 minutes. We'll see you Friday. We'll have new content then. As always, I'm Dan Cohen. I annoy the shit out of you on Twitter, and right now, because of a Twitter ban, I can't like as many posts, which is a bunch of crap. Again, the links are in the description. Please follow them. Like and if you're on Facebook, like it, follow the page. You can even friend me if you want. I don't really post on there anymore. Sometimes I post a meme. That place sucks. Twitter rocks. Twitter rocks 2021. Love you all. Bye.